One day in the cafe, in the storeroom or the inventory room, I was with the chef, and we was looking across the shelf. I was looking, tamarind, imported, pineapples, imported, ginger from China, turmeric from St. Vincent, and mango juice from India in a tin. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, chef, all of this stuff that we've imported could be grown here. This is totally unsustainable. This cannot be economic development. Some way, somehow, we have to move away from this dependency syndrome, this import syndrome, and carve out our own food security.
It's kind of a recurring theme too. It has been spoken of over and over and over. Whether you listen to brass stats or you're talking to other farmers, we need to be more sustainable. At one point, Barbados was sustainable. We didn't need to import very much.
It's years and years of people not practicing farming that has led us away from farming. We farm sugar and we farm the very easy crops like sweet potatoes. Like, we're probably self-sufficient in sweet potato. One crop, but we can't eat sweet potato all day, every day.
I think no country wants to be food insecure. No country would like to know it's a heavy dependence on imports, as is the case in Barbados and many of the other Caribbean countries.
Barbados has this high-end tourism operation which the other islands don't have, and that costs us a lot of money. Because we have maybe, 1 million people come through the island every year, and we have to feed that 1 million people. And that's like 3 times our population. So where do we find the resources to feed an extra 750,000 people?
We need to grow more of our own food and eat it.
That's the challenge.
And eat it, that's a challenge.
Barbados, the most easterly island of the Caribbean, imports an estimated 90% of its food. The impacts of recent sanitary, political, and climate crises on global trade and prices have renewed the debate around food security on the island, while agriculture has declined dramatically since the end of the last century. While some attempts have been made at increasing local food production, they have had limited success as food imports keep rising to the detriment of local traditions and health of the Bajan people. Given these issues, with a highly productive climate and plenty of agricultural land, why not produce more food for local consumption?
I really can't think of anything that would stop farming from developing in Barbados. There's no shortage of money, there's no shortage of land, there's no shortage of rainfall, there's no shortage of good soil, there's no shortage of the knowledge and the technological advances that have been made. Our agriculture is old and it's stuck in the sugar industry that's on thinner ice than it's ever been in its existence. And does the world need more sugar anyway? The biggest challenge is people. If there were enough people with enough resources to put the infrastructure in place, we could produce all the food we could eat in Barbados, no doubt. First of all, there's our history of the sugar industry and slavery. So that actually created almost like people don't want to do agriculture because they associate it with that terrible time.
I knew nothing about agriculture. I only used to hear it from, talking about in history class, and my grandmother telling me about how you had to be carrying up the sugar cane on loads as it go off to the mill. And it was always spoken in a derogatory term. You understand? Like, she was like, that's something that you don't want to get into. My grandmother, one minute she was like, oh boy, don't go out there, the sun too hot, you're too strong, don't go in the sun, don't play up in the dirt, go and sit on the office or go and get a government job. As they go to the government job. One of the biggest problems why a lot of people don't want to get involved in agriculture is because the farmers' business models aren't that good. You understand? And look at this. The majority of the land around us don't have much, infrastructure for anybody to come and work, any place to, use the bathrooms, to wash them hands. And unless, we improve and really invest in agriculture, it can always be that problem. We can got a lot of people that own land, but a lot of people that don't want to work in agriculture, and you need workers first before you can even start to think. Land can sit all year. If you don't got nobody to till the soil, nobody to pull the weeds, nobody to plant the things, if you don't pay people a proper wage to come and do the job or create the environment for them to thrive within the industry, then you'll find a lot of people can get a bachelor's degree, they can get an associate's degree, and then they can go Canada, they can go America, they can go where they're valued, where their skills are valued. Right now, agriculture isn't valued in Barbados, so a lot of intelligent people that can get involved in agriculture can leave as a fault of us. Yeah.
We have to also look at the challenges that farmers have because, and that's part of the system as well, that we need to change, that we need to improve on. The farmers need to have incentives to grow. We still don't have a tractor, but if you have a schedule for your crops and you don't get the plow to come when you want, then you're throwing off your crops. If the tractor man get up late, or he had 3 jobs and he only finished 1, but he can't get to you yet, that sort of thing. So we need to put systems in place for farmers to be able to do their work. Because we talk about consistency of produce to market. How are you going to get consistency of products to market when you don't have consistency in getting your plow in the ground, in getting the seedlings in there on time? Those are some of the problems. And then they have incentive schemes set up at the ministry that some farmers, because they might not know how to write, they will not capitalize on those incentives. They might not even be aware of the incentives. So some sort of education, some knowledge has to go out there. There's a lot more that the agricultural ministry can do. They need to use those people who have the knowledge, and there are a lot of people out there with knowledge. We have some youth, they were here up to yesterday. This is the second cohort of youth that we are training in agro-processing. My husband taught them agriculture last year because they need to know where food comes from. Yesterday we took them on a tour and they saw other farmers, and they get different perspectives. They got to see their ranch with the horses and so on, and got all excited. Another farmer said, "You can come and bring them over by me." Some people say the youth are not interested in agriculture. That's not true. A lot of them are. Okay, and some of them have even started doing their own thing at home with what little spaces they have, and we need to encourage that. We don't get any money from the government for doing this. A lot of it is volunteer work. But my thing is, the youth need to learn. We have some older people who would have been farmers in their youth. They're old now. They're still sitting on a 5-acre lot that nothing is happening. And there's some youth out there learning, getting the knowledge, acquiring the skills that don't have land. You understand? We need to pair those youth with these people so that the youth can work the land. They can still share their produce with the owner. You understand? That body wouldn't have to go and look for food. Food would be right there on their property. And the youth can get a portion to sell to make a living. That should be happening. There's a property down there that's 20 acres. Nothing is happening with it. Nothing. Okay? This one right here below us, that's 21 plus acres, and it's just a little church. I'm also a part of the Women in Agriculture, right? And for so long, we've been trying to get government to look and see exactly what we need to do as far as seed security, food security, and so on. But then you have governments change hands, and then you have problems because one government you speak to, but start doing something, the other government comes, shelve that, and then it just, with this government, we're seeing changes, right? I would love to see them go further with these changes. I would like to see them being implemented, not just talking.
We've also come out of a historical mindset of monocropping and food production only being secondary to making money from monocropping. The economy was being kept going by sugar and rum and the other monocrops that were being exported to bring in money to then use for things like generating power or to pay for imports. So the food production wasn't never really a priority. So the mindset is where the major challenge comes from. And it's two-phase in that regard, because you have the conventional farmers who say, well, we can make money easier, and then you have the need to make money sustainably and ethically, which the conventional farmer and in a large scale, the politics of the society doesn't care about. The ethics is only because you don't want to get locked up for doing something criminal. It's not really about how do we make sure things are clean and nice and good for everybody else in generations to come. So the short-term view is let's make money. If we have to import, let's have enough money we can import, and not the other way around. It's not how do we make sure we can keep our people safe and clean and happy without having to make so much money to import these things to try to make them clean, safe and happy.
Maybe the way the farming is done needs to be different. It definitely needs to be different. And the way it's marketed and the whole pricing structure, everything, the whole thing almost wants the slate wiping clean and start over with, like not depending on deadly pesticides and artificial fertilizers, both of which have to be imported and are doing the soils no good.
There's a disconnect where it comes to understanding about our ecosystem and agriculture and our food production. Everything that we do has consequences. When we did the permaculture course, that cemented in our minds that really and truly we should have some sort of integrated approach to farming, where we use the animal manure to go back into the ground to bring good soil health, and then from that we grow our crops and we eat the crops. So the whole system is circular. When we grow proper grasses without all the chemicals, animals benefit. When we slaughter the animal, if you eat animals, you benefit. I'm putting it that way so people can understand that that system should be what drives our food system.
I'd like to see the whole island producing everything organically, really, because we're small enough. It's not as though we're a huge place where you've got to fly over the land to spray or anything. We've got really small plots. And even though we see the plantation lands as huge tracts of land, it's only huge tracts of land because it's owned by one person. But if that was split up into communities, it's quite manageable in organic systems. You have a ripple effect of everything else around us. We'll attract tourists because of that. We'll keep our seas around us pristine, our water will be clean, and it will be sustainable. We'd employ more people. That's where I'd really like to see the organic movement going.
Founded in 1997, the Organic Growers and Consumers Association counts over 20 farmers that use organic methods on over 500 acres today. They are not alone. Around the island, initiatives adopting and teaching sustainable farming practices have multiplied in the last decade, but one issue remains common to both conventional and organic farmers.
Those who have taken an interest and tried to make a go of it are up against the biggest threat to any farmer is having their stuff stolen, predial larceny.
And in Barbados in particular, we have a challenge that other islands don't even have. We have monkeys, which do a lot of damage to crops.
It is a huge impediment to production. I've spoken to farmers who have, for example, 10 acres of land, but they're only farming on 2 because that is what they can supervise. That's what they can keep an eye on, So yeah, it is. If we can fix that problem, then it opens up a whole different level of productivity on the island.
My big problem with farming in Barbados is the lack of stiff penalties for predial larceny. You can't expect a farmer to inject time money, blood, sweat, and tears, and go sleep tonight looking out in his crops and say, oh, he's ready to pick tomorrow, I'm going to reap tomorrow. Till wake up in the morning and find it empty. And you're going to tell me, by some wild stretch of the imagination, catch Mike with a truckload of produce that he has no ground to produce it with, he has no license, nothing to say he's a farmer, but he's going to go to the store and sell a truckload of sweet potatoes, and they don't inquire. So if you have persons who are openly giving a market for people to go and commit predial larceny, and then government is not putting stiff penalties on these people, what are you going to drive a farmer to do? Go out in the crop and lie down at night, or sit down and wait and blow off somebody's head? Then you're going to charge you for murder.
Generally speaking, when we talk about the organized larceny and so on, there's very few people that are involved, both for the crop and the livestock. It's the same names that keep coming up. One of the recommendations was to actually develop a unit within the police force that's dedicated to tackling larceny, communication systems, alerts, neighborhood watches and so on, where people can prompt the police if they see something, know something suspicious happening on the farms. Those were perhaps the solutions that were kind of the lower cost to the farm itself, but of course lighting, fencing, dogs and so on, because they have to feed the dogs. And again, we come back to where are we going as far as competitiveness is concerned, because we already pointed to a slew of areas that cause the cost of production to go up.
The problem is, too, is that there were restrictions. They said certain areas when you build a home, you can't raise chickens because you're going to be too close to your neighbor and the scent might humbug your neighbor and stuff like that. But it is better for you to be near your garden than to be a mile or a mile and a half from it, so that you could say, all right, at 3 o'clock, I can just go there, put in an hour work, and come back in. But if I have to drive all the way there are a lot of families that they start farming because being by the land is so far from them, then people that they're not belong to reap them, and by the time you get there, they're all gone. Why they restrict the policy of not raising animals as it goes on, I don't know. So you will get this generation not knowing how to raise a chicken, how to dig a hole in the ground.
It was done before. In the Second World War, shipping was inconsistent and we were self-sufficient back then. But things have changed since then, and whereas many people kept like a kitchen garden and kept a couple of animals or whatever, that has shifted, and way less people do that, and way more people are just eating from the supermarket. Simple as that, and that's all imported food, and it's so it's found us in a position now where we're actually very, very far away from food security and food sovereignty. Very far.
We could do it, but until we're pushed, because otherwise, we're on a Western kind of, everything is imported from so far away, some things as far as New Zealand and Thailand. I mean, you just think in terms of the carbon footprint and all those things now that we're getting a little conscious of, whereas, years ago it was just like, oh, the more we can get, the better, And then you got 30-something different types of mayonnaise in the shop. And do we need it, It's just a model that we're following. But, when you have a sort of semi-crisis situation, then it kind of brings it to mind that we could do.
Regardless of what else you're doing, I mean, you can become a lawyer, veterinarian, whatever else you're doing, everybody needs to eat. So to me, a farmer is the most secure job, across the board. Food prices going up. If you can't get gas for the car, diesel for the van, you still got to go and get something to eat. And it's good if you can go in your backyard. The closer you can go to get something to eat, the better. Supermarkets, the quality, the price, the quantity, and basically you don't know what it is you're eating. Because in agriculture sometimes we have crop theft, and You don't know if those crops were sprayed, what insecticides were used, if they were raised organically, or if it was... A lot of that stuff comes in for a lot of people now, not just getting something in their stomach.
What is food? Food, that could be interpreted in many different ways, but primarily I would like to say food is anything that can be consumed that results in nutritional benefit or mental benefit.
Yeah, food is really the source of my nourishment.
I think Damien's response is more appropriate. It's nourishment to have bodily functions and to move and
exactly.
exist.
Exactly.
It's life. Food is life. Food is really life.
That's right, yeah.
I believe food is a human right. It's that which nourishes us on many levels, so the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual. And it's that which connects people all together from different cultures, geographies, and when you break bread or share a cup of tea together, it's a love language all of its own.
My thing about food is not only you should eat it yourself, but you should share it with others and share it with love. Today's world from yesterday's world is a much different world in terms of there are much more variety than we have years ago, but it's not of a better quality. Mostly back then we would do everything ourselves, but now you can go to the supermarket and pick it up home and bam, finish.
We used to eat a lot more vegetables and fruits as children. Now, the snack comes in a pack. But before, my snack at school was, you see the dunks? A pack of dunks with a little salt. That was a snack. The hawker or the vendor at the school, she would cut those up, those vegetables, and so you can get all sorts of different things as your snack on a tray that a vendor brings. But now you go to a school and you see that tray, it hardly has any fruit. It's all plastic bags. If I had to run the country and a hawker is going to a school with a tray, she has to bring fruit and veg and do away with the plastic stuff.
Someone may just pick up food and they eat and they think they're meeting their caloric requirement, but what most people don't see is the web of different interactions that happen to get your tea right here, looking at global trade, looking at the politics, looking at economics, the sociology, and each person's cultural beliefs. So it's a huge fabric that we're interwoven in, and unfortunately with climate change and a lot of inequalities across the world, food has become a huge political act. With the rise of multinationals such as KFC and conglomerates that push for fast food, slow food is a way to go against that. So the history, Slow Food International was started by Carlo Petrini, and when you saw the rise of McDonald's in his town area in Italy, he gathered his friends to protest, and so that was a way of him saying we don't want a fast food chain to come in and, you know, threaten our local culture around all the traditions about food, again, around health and well-being. And so it was quite, I guess, over 30 years ago, quite revolutionary at the time.
Slow food is one of the food movements that have grown since the 90s to challenge the impacts of global trade on local lifestyles. Food sovereignty is another movement that had a lot of success across Latin America and Asia to fight for the right of local peoples to define their own agricultural and food policies. While food sovereignty has a lot of potential for Barbados, it is strangely absent from the Caribbean. We rather speak of food security, which focuses on availability, accessibility, and stability of food supplies. But through food security, no one gets a say about what is made available to them and at what price.
The word globalization, I would say it is a kind of recolonization of the South by northern corporations. But it doesn't stop there. It's a kind of colonization of their own peoples inside their own countries also.
I was shooting a movie in Senegal in 2008, if I remember correctly, and my director, Moussa Senabsa, was telling me, Mood, you people in Barbados, you're not very smart, because when you talk about wanting to create or make a creative industries in Barbados, it's not really going to work, because everything we put in our mouths in Barbados is imported. And he was like, you know, Mood, food is the first art. And if you don't own it, how can you then talk about being creative and owning your own sovereignty and identity? And to be quite honest, that struck me. That resonated. I got upset. I got angry with him too. But when I came back to Barbados, it stuck with me. And that, in my journey of reinventing myself after the financial crash of 2008-9, what we call the lost decade in Barbados, was that, you know, maybe you need to go back to the roots. Maybe you need to go back to food as the first art, and personal reinvention, but also on a national level, we have to have food sovereignty.
The breadfruit and the cassava and those things are all now non-gluten. Those foods which were considered, because it's the foods that the slaves ate, and so they were considered kind of lowly or whatever, you know, say, what poor people eat those foods, but in fact those foods are more nutritious generally and healthier for you. I think in the Caribbean, I would say the Rasta culture would have emphasized it. Once the rest of the world says, wow, this is like in, we've got people now making cassava flour, coconut flour, breadfruit flour.
I did agro-processing at a community college with a lady called Miss Marion Hart. So Miss Hart taught us how to make the flours. And it's easy. There are different steps for some of the things, because the cassava you need to take all the starch out from the cassava. The breadfruit, you just soak it in salt water and you take out the whatever little starch is in that, and then you dehydrate it and then you grind it. It's simple. Those things are simple. It's just a matter of knowing.
I mean, I think what happened is people got educated away from, it's like, remember when there was one time and then it was like, oh, tinned milk or whatever is better than breast milk, and people went to that, and then of course had to come back to, oh no, natural is best, you know. So I think what happened here in the island is going through, when we were like more of an early development process, which meant that we were now getting all the bad influence. People never ate, like, you know, yellow dye cheese Reese's and whatever, and you know, like, people ate better before. And then we started getting all the stuff with all the preservatives, you know. Definitely, I would say, in terms of a personal sovereignty, is that you know where your food is coming from, you know what's gone into producing it. And I think that if you do that, then you can control your health and your well-being. And to me, that's a level of sovereignty that I would like to continue to have.
I think over 30% of insurance claims are towards the treatment of NCDs in Barbados. Quite a few of the hospital beds, quite a few of the drugs brought in and the treatments and so on that are administered here in Barbados are attributable to diet-related diseases.
The government is complaining about our healthcare system. They need to start to look and do some sort of assessment when it comes to the health of our people, right? See what they're eating.
With 1 in 3 adults being hypertensive and 1 in 5 diabetic, non-communicable diseases, or NCDs, are the most important causes of mortality in Barbados. And on top of the burden of NCDs on healthcare and the lives of many people, new sources of motivation to produce healthy local food have appeared since 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic, the ashfall following a volcano eruption on neighboring island St. Vincent, Hurricane Elsa, and more recently, the Russo-Ukrainian War, have together caused an unprecedented decline in revenues from tourism, the main driver of the Bajan economy. Meanwhile, food prices skyrocketed and the distribution system was hampered by delays and disruptions.
COVID came along and we went into lockdown from about March, April or so. And our food supplies were started to be regulated, certain days of shopping, people not working. And next thing, every other person was gardening and growing food. And so I think that was the thing that really brought to a lot of people's mind immediately, like what our situation could be, because we are so dependent on the outside world for so many of our food supplies.
It's only recently I've started, me personally, I've started seeing sections in the supermarket that sell local produce. Day before yesterday, I actually went and I purchased 2 bananas. 2 bananas cost me $2. They're local bananas, they're great. There's lots of bananas growing in St. John, St. Joseph, and so on. But then I went to one large supermarket here that imports. For $5, I got about 20 bananas. So there's something missing in that equation for me when it comes to local produce. Sure, the cost of producing locally is high because the wages in Barbados are higher and there's less scale and all that economic stuff. But there's no way you should be able to import something into Barbados. And it applies to things, other produce too, meats and so on. You import it into Barbados, put on a markup, sell it, and it is still like way lower than it costs to produce it locally. Something in there doesn't add up for me.
That is a situation that can also be quite easily rectified. Government can take a position to protect local farmers by restricting importations. That's one avenue that has been used for decades. I'm not convinced that that is even necessary.
Governments will want to see import substitution, ICA, the other agencies will want to do that, but we also have to recognize that consumers are the ones that buy food, and we have to try to change consumer preferences. So while we're talking about import substitution, we have to ensure that consumers recognize the value of buying local, of buying from regional sources.
I think that consumers in general do not value the quality of the products that you can obtain locally without necessarily using tons of pesticides, without the transportation costs, all the energies that is being used for importing fruits and vegetables from abroad. The local consumers do not necessarily value that, so they are willing to pay a price that they are used to pay at in other countries, or a price that they used to pay when they buy in big bulk at the grocery store that sell in larger quantities. But for farmers, to sell, to start to put your act together and start working on harvesting and planning and making sure that you take care of your production and then package it and sell it, why would they do that if they get $1 for a breadfruit, or $1 for a basket of something they've been produced? I mean, it's so little amount of money for them. So I don't blame them to not having the incentive to start producing more or to start organizing better, because they don't get the price that they should be getting for what they offer.
Consumers certainly play a crucial role in the food system, but they make choices under the pressure of financial limitations, marketing, and historical legacies. In Barbados, consumption patterns are embedded in the colonial structure that enslaved and divided Bajans for 3 centuries and is kept in place by the elite, who made its fortune from the plantation economy and now owns the distribution sector. Can the government rectify the power imbalance? In order to increase the production and consumption of local foods, many participants of this documentary pointed to a lack of support from the government. Over several months, multiple attempts were made at contacting government officials and other institutions involved in the food system for them to comment. Unfortunately, most of them ignored or declined the invitation. The Ministry of Agriculture blamed the lack of funding to explain their limited power. Of course, in many developing economies of the world, global trade agreements in the 90s led local governments to stop subsidizing food production to fund more lucrative industries instead. Developed countries then forced their cheaper food upon local markets, influencing local diets forever and devaluing local food production and traditions. In Barbados, the industries developed in the long term were mostly in tourism and other services.
My whole issue with this whole thing is the only thing Barbados seems to be able to have and constantly have is services. We are a service-driven industry, and who can eat service?
We're an island that aspires to be first world, and that creates a very interesting era where we're trying to evolve very quickly. So there's a lot of gaps there.
If you ask us what our mission is, I think over the next 10 years, it's to go beyond what we're doing, to push even harder into going into those, into some of these more staple crops, as well as, tackling some longer term projects like some orchards, and maybe going into, some medicinal and cosmetic, crops as well, things that would actually do well here, that there should be a lot of support for once, people have the right plans, because I think it's just we're missing potentially manufacturing facilities to process some of these things. So we'd have to really make big plans on a decent scale to get some of these things in motion in a way where we'd actually be aloe to, say export aloe gel. There's just so many things to tackle here in Barbados. There's just because so little is being grown, because there's so little organic. We've got to try it. There's got to be more energy going to back people that are at least trying these things, that want to develop industries here that could make this place not just a tourist dollar sucking country.
Have we ever done a cost benefit analysis on tourism? As a small island with limited resources, limited fresh water, limited food, limited energy, have anyone ever sat down and studied the impact of tourism? Is it really bringing in money? If we had taken this same investment and put it into other areas, meaning agriculture, agrotourism, and so on, energy, would we have gotten a bigger return? I mean, one of the challenges with this type of mass tourism is that the kind of jobs it produces are low-end, working-class jobs. And that might sound hard, but that's the fact. Tourism, in some ways, is like the oil plantation. And if we want to be a 21st century economy, are these the kind of jobs that we are going to keep developing? What happened to the botanists, the agriculturalists, the chefs, not cooks, chefs, how do we develop our small island into somewhere that is sustainable, that is resilient, that will adapt to climate change? I am not sure anymore that mass tourism is the answer. And it's a hard question to ask. I work in the hotel industry, and I ask myself that too every day.
Luckily, many local initiatives are moving towards agrotourism to create some of the missing links between tourism and agriculture. Together with the growing movement of farmers innovating to substitute imports and agro-processors putting local produce back at the center of their craft, they can use tourism as a driving force rather than a challenge to local food production. To encourage these initiatives, both governments and consumers need to put more resources into the food system. Too long, agriculture has been considered strictly as a business, to be left to the forces of the global market. But isn't it, like healthcare and education, one of the fundamental institutions we need to survive and flourish?
Are we prepared to do what is necessary to ensure food security? And I'm not talking about the governments and the agencies necessarily, but the average Joe on the street. Are we willing to change our consumer preferences? Are we willing to make the hard decisions, for instance, with the monkeys? Are we willing to go and eradicate the monkeys to enhance food production? Are we willing to stop the guy who's stealing stuff and selling it on the side of the road, putting him in jail? These are the things that you have to consider. Are you going to try to change your consumption patterns? I need some broccoli, I need some sweet potato, I need some locally produced fruits. Are you going to do that, or do you prefer to simply buy pizza